BRUCAST is back, baby.
So do you guys have a president, or do you guys have? I'm sorry, I'm completely ignorant on the subject.
We
Do
are
you
a
guys have a? Yeah.
We are a presidential republic.
Okay.
So a republic where the president has the dominant role in the government. But again, that's on paper. There have also been quite a few changes about that. We had the same president for 30 years up until a year ago. And during the mass protests on the streets and something that is you can characterize as a popular uprising has forced that old president to leave for now, and his and the puppet that through which that president was in power now became the actually fully controlled, fully legitimate president. So it's a very complicated time. So you can say that we have gotten rid of the old autocrat, and now we are not sure if the new guy is going to be an autocrat as well, or if he is going to actually change something. So we are definitely a more autocratic country.
What's the name of the new guy?
Tokayev.
Tokayev.
The full name is Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, but internationally you can just refer to him as President Tokayev.
President Tokayev. All right. Well, if he doesn't resign a couple of years, there's going to be another uprising of the population, and the cycle going to repeat. But hopefully he changed something, right? Otherwise, it's going to stay in this cycle forever.
Well, that's what we're afraid of, because even if he doesn't, a lot of us understand that we do not have the pleasure of having a Western country at our borders who is going to support us. So for Kazakhstan, the price of weakness that would undoubtedly come with a period of chaos that usually comes with these uprisings. For us, that's very dangerous, because our neighbors are not exactly good people. Our neighbors are China and Russia and other republics in Central Asia, but those aren't quite hostile to us. But being weak and bordered by those two giants you gotta think twice before doing that. Plus, the country is in crisis as it is. Having one guy basically at the head of the government and continuing the old corruption system, you can see the same pattern in most other post-Soviet countries. Rampant corruption, oligarchy, that kind of stuff. It's quite damaging. And what we see now is the country is economically is not doing all that well, because having the same old guy in charge for 30 years who really lets corruption flourish is not good for your country.
Wouldn't be that called a dictatorship if the guy is in power and he doesn't want to leave?
It would, but Kazakhstan is more of a rule of law country compared to places like Belarus, for example. Belarus is a dictatorship.
Okay.
With Kazakhstan, it's been more. There was never a need for them to show their true colors, but it's far, far from actually a democratic country.
I see. When you were talking earlier about the Russian influence, I was thinking about the situation in Brazil and how the U.S. heavily influences Brazil. We have no European, maybe a little bit, but almost none European influence at all, or any kind of other influences besides U.S.
No, you don't keep up close ties with Portugal?
I wouldn't say so. No, I wouldn't say so.
So you kicked them out and you told them and never come back.
Basically, yeah. Even our Portuguese, we don't consider Portuguese. We actually have a specific name for it. It's Portuguese from Brazil. It's a different language.
Yeah, I mean, because if you put it in the same umbrella as Portuguese, then technically there are more people speaking Portuguese in Brazil than in Portugal itself.
Did you know that as Brazilians, we can understand the Portuguese from Portugal, but the other way around is not true. If you speak Brazilian Portuguese to people from Portugal, they can't understand it. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's because the people who lived in Brazil had the need to understand the original, the mainland Portuguese, but very few people in Portugal itself actually had the need to understand the Brazilian Portuguese. Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So during my research, I also noticed that below Kazakhstan, there's a lot of other countries. Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and I start
Also,
wondering.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Tajikistan, also Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. So
Mhm.
I gotta represent my brothers.
All right, so you have a good relationship with those other countries.
No.
Okay.
Okay, no, me personally, I have a good relationship, but
Okay.
politics in Central Asia are, well, we're not hostile to each other openly, but it's a difficult region. And for example, Kazakhstan specifically like puts a lot of effort into not having conflicts with anybody ever at all.
Mhm.
Well, you kind of can't really afford conflicts when you're surrounded by, Russia, China, and, well, basically you win a lot more from not having friends. Let's call it that way. Between
Mhm.
people, there aren't that many conflicts, but I have also, like, I would be lying if I say I haven't noticed any enmity between the way certain Kazakhs, for example, refer to Kyrgyz or the Uzbeks. But I never supported that. And in my family, in my larger friend group back home, nobody really considers it as anything good to just not respect other people from republics. The closest to us are the Kyrgyz, ethnically and linguistically, but the relationships between the country, like on the government levels, relationships sometimes are a bit, how to say, not as friendly as they could have been, or arguably should have been. It's a difficult region with a lot of history, and it's also a region that is still recovering from colonial and Soviet influence. We all understand that there are a lot of scars, a lot of wounds that either still hurt or can be reopened very quickly. So gotta be careful.
Yeah, those things take time. I know. I mean, we are in Germany right now, and I know some Germans who are still, of course, affected by the Second World War. And how many years ago was that? A long time ago. But those things, they take time to recover, like generations. It
Yeah.
takes a while. Yeah.
For example, going back to the Russian influence in Kazakhstan, and we have a large proportion of people who are ethnically Kazakhs, who are loyal to Kazakhstan, culturally Kazakh, but they speak better Russian than Kazakh, because Russian is the language of international communication in Kazakhstan. And if, for example, you were born and grew up in a setting where where you're surrounded by other nationalities, for example, you're surrounded by the Russians, the Chinese. Like in my school, I was friends with I had friends who were Jewish, Belarus, Russians, Chinese, and Russian just kind of naturally works right now as the language of international communication. So people who grew up in that setting would speak better Russian than Kazakh. The situation is changing a lot, but yeah, it'll take some
Does
time.
does Kazakhstan also use Cyrillic as the alphabet, or?
Currently, the Kazakh language uses the Cyrillic alphabet, but we are in the process of transitioning to Latin.
Okay. How this process is going?
You can, if you are, I don't know about other cities, but in my hometown, you can already see that a lot of the how to say, uh,
Shops.
a lot of shops already have their banners written in the Latin version of the Kazakh language.
That's so
You see it
interesting.
used occasionally, you see it used on the internet, but I wouldn't say that it's going as successful or as deep as it should be going. Not as fast, right? Not as fast as it should be going, because predominantly people who write stuff in Kazakh would still write it in a Cyrillic version.
And I guess what is pushing all these changes is a more independent culture, right? You guys want you to feel more independent from Russia.
Yeah,
I would,
there is clearly a desire for that. The whole thing with the changing the language, actually changing it back to Latin, because Kazakh language, well, it didn't have a written alphabet for a long time. I believe, we used Arabic, and at the different times we used Arabic, Cyrillic, and Latin was the one that actually stuck for a while, but it was the end of the Russian Civil War. The communists won, and sorry, but for our convenience, you're going to have to write in Cyrillic now. I think that's also the same policy that gave us the Cyrillic version of the Polish alphabet at the time, which is now happily done and dusted. But yeah.
So I guess you learned both at school, like both
At
Cyrillic
school,
and.
three languages. Oh, you mean the version? Right now,
Yeah.
I don't know if they switched to teaching people the Latin version of Kazakh in school, but when I was in school, I learned the Cyrillic version.
Only the Cyrillic version.
Cyrillic version only started being discussed in 2014 after Russians, started after the Russians invaded Ukraine. Let's go fix their own names and illegally occupied Crimea. We all at that moment realized that all of that talk about the brotherhood of nations and yada yada is like, yeah, sure. But we also find ourselves in a place where we cannot openly say that we are against Russia because our geographic situation forces us to sacrifice some of our pride and not say things that we would otherwise really want to say, because the price of making an enemy out of, for example, Russia or China is extreme, and we are not a very strong society. It's 19 million of us spread across several hundreds of thousands kilometers. I don't remember what's the territory of Kazakhstan, but it's a ridiculous territory.
It is.
And there are very few of us. And we really do not want to lose any of it because it took a lot of blood and sweat and effort to keep what we have as it is. So forces us to be clever and a bit more subtle about these things, which is why, for example, we started the whole process of changing the alphabet from the Cyrillic system to a Latin one. Ideally should bring us closer to Turkey, and I think Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan, forgive my ignorance, but I think either Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan have gone through that process of Latinization of their alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's going to make communication a bit easier.
I see. So there's a precedent. So you're like trying the same strategy that other countries did, and it worked for them. So you're kind of trying to do the same.
Yeah, in general, when it comes to mentality, currently, Kazakhstan, well, historically, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan didn't really innovate a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We preferred to sit back and wait for somebody else to try and then learn from their experience.
Well, that's
We
clever.
did that. I mean, there were other people, rushing to the finish line, so we decided to take it a little easier. Anecdotally, when the Soviet Union actually broke apart and all the republics were leaving, Kazakhstan was the last republic to leave the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
So there was technically a week of time where the entirety of the Soviet Union was Kazakhstan.
Whoa. Oh, wow.
Same with currency. We piggybacked over the ruble for quite a while before introducing our own currency.
Which one? What's the name of the current currency?
Tenge.
Tenge. All right.
Yeah.
Sam, I have a kind of weird question. So Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, what's up with all the stan? Does it mean something?
Yes, stan means land of.
Land. Oh, okay. Oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
All of a sudden, it's a more popular. I think this comes from the Iranian influence. I might be wrong with that, but I think this comes from the Iranian influence. Historically, in the region of Central Asia and around Iran and around Pakistan, Iranian culture and Iranian influence have played a really significant role. And like their language also played a significant role. So, Stan. All of those countries have been, well, Kazakhstan have never been a part of any kind of Iranian state, but we have been influenced by them.
Watch full episodes of the BRUCAST on the main YouTube channel, youtube.com/@BrewFrasca.